Hey, what's happening? It's goukigod. So today I want to talk about the Bespin DLC for Star Wars Battlefront, which became available to everyone who doesn't have the Season Pass just recently. Now, I'm normally not a big fan of paid DLC like this, because when you compare it to the full game, what you get for the money is typically not comparable or the same value as the game. So for instance, in Australia, the Bespin DLC was $23, and if you split the game in a quarter, that's roughly the quarter of the cost of the game. Now, does the Bespin DLC contain a quarter of the game's content? Probably not, which makes it a little bit pricey. But I do think that what it offers is different enough from the main game to be worth a look in. So let's go over what this expansion includes. You get 5 new maps all set in the Cloud City of Bespin, and one of them is specifically for dogfighting in Fighter Squadron. There are 2 new heroes, you've got Lando and Dengar. There's a new vehicle, which is the Cloud Car. There's a new game mode, which is Sabotage. There are 2 brand new weapons, the EE4 and the X8, and there are 3 new star cards. There's the Scout Binoculars, the Shock Grenade, and Disruptor. So let's go over the maps and modes firstly. So first of all, the maps look and play very differently from the rest of the maps that are on offer. There's a real big contrast predominantly in terms of how they look, because they're all clean and city environments, where typically all the existing Battlefront maps are outdoor organic environments, so they're either outdoor in a forest or you're in the snow. There's not a whole lot where you've got buildings and surrounded by predominantly man-made structures. These new maps are absolutely gorgeous as well, which sort of goes along with the rest of the Star Wars Battlefront look and feel. So in terms of quality, they're absolutely up there with the rest of the game's content. The level which has got the pit in which Han Solo was frozen is particularly awesome and is really exciting to play on for anyone who's a big fan of the films. I must admit I've died a few times just looking around the area and not actually paying attention to the game that I was playing. Overall, the maps are really epic and they play really well with all the game modes, and thankfully all the game modes are available on this one, unlike the original Outer Rim DLC where it was predominantly close quarters. So you'll be able to play all the big maps like Walker Assault and Turning Point, as well as the close quarters matches as well, like Blast. Now, the new game mode is called Sabotage, and I actually think this is quite fun. It's a nice change from the existing modes, and I like how the objective switches halfway through the game from a sort of capture the flag to a domination style objective. So basically the whole point of the mode is the rebels have to destroy these 3 generators, and the Imperial forces have to try and stop them. If the rebels succeed in destroying them, they then move on to capture a point, and if they can capture a point, which is the extraction zone, then a ship comes and they win. I really like the combination of 2 different types of game modes because it spices up the action and it kind of gives the match a different sort of feeling. So it can go from fast paced to slow and then back to fast, which is nice. It adds some welcome variety. Like I said, Walker Assault is incredibly epic on these new maps. I will say that it's a little hard to get line of sight on the walkers later on, so I think this may need a balance at some point, but it's definitely not broken. I think the map design is really successful. It provides both close and long-range gunfights, and it makes good use of the new DLC weapons as well. The Fighter Squadron level is actually surprisingly good. I'm not a huge fan of the mode. That's probably because I'm not so great at it. But the new level for Fighter Squadron is exciting, and Cloud City is such an awesome backdrop for having dogfights. So let's move on to the new weapons. There's a decent amount of stuff to unlock now via the hut contracts, and it finally feels like there's a huge amount of items in the game to grind for, albeit a large amount of them are now DLC. But overall, I think this is adding some much needed variety to the game, and it means that people are starting to run lots of different weapons and star cards and just setups in general now. So the games in general feel like there's lots of people running different things, as before it felt like people were just running the same sort of options. Now, I really like the 2 new weapons that are available. The EE4 is probably the standout for me. It may even need a nerf. It is pretty damn good. It's supposed to be a close-range weapon. It's basically a submachine gun of the EE3. So it's incredibly melty up close. It's pretty good at range. And if you use it at long range with focus fire, it's actually still quite effective. So I think at some point it will probably need a nerf at the long range, or maybe it needs a longer cooldown or something like that. Because in my short time with the weapon, I've just found it to be incredibly effective. The fact that everybody's using it as well may also be an indication that it's actually quite a strong weapon. The new star cards that they've added are also pretty cool. The scout binoculars will allow you to spot enemies very much like you can in Battlefield, and it was something that I felt that was missing from the game. Not that I think that Battlefront feels an awful lot like Battlefield, but being a dice game, it was just something that I instinctively went to do, so it's nice that that's in the game. It's basically a wall hack that allows you and your teammates to see enemies through walls, and it's incredibly effective. The next one is the shock grenade. Now this stuns enemies and prevents them from moving or firing weapons, and this is really good for clearing choke points and helping your team push forward in those difficult situations where the other team might have an area really well locked down. Disruption is the final star card that's available, and it's an EMP style blast that temporarily disables blaster cooldowns, turrets and droids, I believe. This is also really effective at helping your team push forward. Obviously, if you can disable the enemy team's equipment, it will help you capture an objective or push through an area that's been particularly well locked down. Unsurprisingly, all of these new star cards work particularly well on the new maps and also in the new sabotage game mode. Now, along with the new star cards and weapons, there is a new vehicle, which is the Cloud Car, and this is the classic Bespin cloud vehicle as seen in the movies. It doesn't play radically different to the other vehicles that are in the game. It's probably the closest, I think, to the Snow Speeder, although it's a lot more maneuverable than the Snow Speeder. It's got a laser blast, a rocket, and a jammer so that you can prevent incoming rockets. My only complaint with the Cloud Car is it's got incredibly weak armor. I'm pretty sure that I've been one-shot killed from a pulse cannon, and it doesn't take much for someone with a blaster on the ground if they get a beat on you to bring you down. The other thing that's weird is that both sides have access to the Cloud Car. So the Rebels, I think, use the red one, but if you're an Imperial, you have a blue-colored one, which seems a little bit weird to me. It would have made more sense if there was a TIE Fighter, but I think the TIE Fighters and the other vehicles are a little bit stronger than the Cloud Car, so perhaps it would have been unbalanced. You can actually use the Cloud Car in the Fighter Squadron mode, and I have tried it a couple of times, but I just find that you die so quickly that it's really not all that effective. So let's move on to the new heroes. There are two new heroes in this one, Lando and Dengar. We'll start with Lando. I think he's fun and fast, and he's got some really good team-oriented abilities. He's able to stun groups of enemies with a trap. It's a bit like the shock grenade, although a little bit more powerful. He's also got a disruption ability, which is a bit like the disruption star card, but much more powerful. It only affects weapons and star cards though, but it prevents people from firing their weapon or using this star card at all, and it even affects heroes, so this is very, very powerful. And just like the rest of the star cards, it's incredibly good at controlling objectives. Dengar is the other new hero, and to be honest, he's a really weird choice. I mean, I think almost anybody in the Star Wars universe would have made more sense as a choice for a new DLC character, but he's actually kind of cool. He's more of a Slayer/tank type of character, and his abilities focus on dealing damage. So, for instance, one of the things that he can do is rush forward and stick a bunch of grenades on all the close-by enemies. So he can be really, really effective for allowing teams to push forward and just basically clearing a whole bunch of enemies so that your team can get on with playing the objective. So that's all the stuff that comes in the paid DLC. As you can see, there's quite a fair bit. It is a fair bit more than the previous DLC, the Outer Rim. Now, along with this, there's also a bunch of patches and buffs and nerfs and stuff that they released in this July update. So there's a new level cap which is available to everybody, and with that level cap there's a bunch of new skins that you can earn for both the Rebel and the Imperial side, which is nice because I felt that both sides could have used a bit more variety. There's also been a ton of different buffs and nerfs and tweaks to the multiplayer. So lots of weapons and abilities have been tweaked. In particular, the new Berserker star card that was added, I believe, in the last round of free DLC has been buffed, so it is a lot more effective, and a bunch of other different weapons have been buffed and nerfed as well. I believe that Boba Fett may have also received another nerf. He's still very powerful, but he's nowhere near as powerful as he was when the game first launched. So in summary, all in all, I think that this is a pretty substantial DLC, and I think that the type of content, the maps and the weapons that's available is very, very different to the main game, and that's why I think it definitely is worth the purchase. It is a little bit steep. I would have thought that maybe $15 Australian would have been a more appropriate price, but 23 is probably the absolute maximum. Maybe 25 is the most that I would pay for this type of content, so it's not extortionately high. My only complaint is it unfortunately does feel a bit like a pay-to-win type system in regards to the weapons and star cards. Before I bought the DLC, when everybody who had the season pass was using the weapons, it was really annoying to get wrecked by the EE4 and have players use star cards that you're not familiar with on you because you're not really sure how to counter them. So I feel like people who have this DLC have the advantage of having these new weapons and star cards and heroes, but they also have the advantage of knowing how these systems work and how best to counter them, where if you haven't encountered them before, you're going to be at a massive disadvantage. Anyway, having said that, I can recommend this DLC for anyone who's really into Battlefront and has been feeling a little bit tired of the current maps and modes and weapons. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all later. See ya!